This is Lauren from Wearing History, and I've got another tutorial for the Gina 1930s dress pattern, although this can be used with any vintage pattern where you need to do a bias facing on something that you attach. Now I have a ton of bias tutorials already on my blog for bias facing and bias binding, so you can go and find those there, but it doesn't go over attaching one piece to another and then facing that. So I'm going to give you a really quick demonstration of what that means. Now I've attached for this specific pattern my sleeve to, the cuff to the bodice, and you can see that I just folded this in half since this is a one-piece cuff and then sewed it like this. So you've got your seam allowance that needs to be finished still. What the bias will do, it will attach to where this stitch line was, and then it will turn it towards the inside, and that will be finished with bias. The reason why you want to do that is if you were wearing this and you just attached it as a regular cuff, you would see this seam finish right here. So say you turn this under, you would see this surging and it would butt up right against where it turns, since this is a turn back cuff. If your cuff was meant to go down, it wouldn't matter. You could finish it like you usually do a collar or whatever, but because this is a turn up cuff and this edge is the one that's shown next to the skin, you don't want to be able to see your seam finish when you're wearing the garment. That's why they have you do it with a bias facing. Now, when I made a note for the pattern, for the cutting instructions, I said to keep all of your scraps. This is where your scraps come in handy. So I roll my scraps like this generally. I had a lot for this pattern because I had extra yardage. So make sure that you get your bundle of scraps that you put aside, and then you're going to iron them, and I'll show you briefly how to cut these. There's a ton of tutorials out there for how to cut bias because it's really popular with quilting. But in case you're unfamiliar with it, I will show you the way I do it. I've pulled out one of my stranger shaped scraps so that you can kind of get an idea if you are cutting in the center here. If you're going from the salvage, it's really easy because you have a straight line to attach, to use as your guide. You would fold it at a 45-degree angle. Here's a little piece of salvage over on the side. You would fold it at a 45-degree angle and use a ruler to make sure that that is flush, usually like an L-shaped ruler, like this. And then you can press it or fold it or whatever, and that's your cut line. If you're using something that's in the middle, since obviously that was too small to be able to make a sort of a facing, the stripe is really easy. You would grab your ruler. This is the ruler I use. It's one of these clear ones, and I also have a rotary cutter. Make sure you're extra careful with these. I've heard horror stories of people cutting fingers and toes and things with those. And you have these grids on your ruler that's square shape. Now, to cut a 45-degree angle, you simply align it so it's a diamond shape, like this, you see. So here's straight, and then you make your squares a diamond. I'll zoom in closer so you can see what I mean. Okay, so zoomed in here, you can see that I have these stripes. This stripe we're going to assume is the straight of grain, because that's how it should be. Some stripes aren't on grain, but that's another story for another day. And you've got these squares, right? Now the top of the square and the bottom of the square, when it's in a diamond shape, is what you want to align with your stripe. I'm going for the side of this green stripe. I wouldn't go for the center of the stripe because it won't necessarily be on grain. You can see there's these little black lines with holes in the middle. Go for the very edge of the black line. And when you zoom out, you can see that it is like this, right? Now, you want to go for the widest amount that you can so that hopefully you can get all of your sleeve cuff in one go. That means that I'm going to actually align it more over here. I have a baby, sorry. And then I get a cut all the way from here to here, which is a longer cut. Now you can piece these together as you need to. That was really common in the period. It's also really common for quilting. So you don't have to worry if you don't get a strip as long as your cuff. You just want to make sure that you piece it together so that there is enough length to go all the way around and have seam allowance at the end. Don't forget the seam allowance at the end, or else you'll have raw edges. All right. Show you what to do next. No, I can cut this now. impromptu video. Apologies, it is not very organized. Okay, so I'm going to hold this with my hand so it's nice and firm, butt up my rotary cutter right to the edge, and push on this mat and go all the way up here. Don't use like a table or people have done it on their carpeting, on their bedspreads. Don't do that, or else you have a big hole and slit in there. Make sure you have one of these healing mats. Okay, you can get these at craft stores. All right, so now there's my 45-degree angle. I want to have a 1/2 inch finished bias binding, so I am going to use my ruler and go in 1 inch. This one square on my ruler is 1 inch, and then I'm going to take my rotary cutter and I'm going to do it again. And just keep on going like that. The longest edge will be this side and the other side that you cut off, and then you can use these to piece together as you need to. I hope that makes sense. Let's say that you are cutting and you don't have a lot of scraps left over, so you need to piece your pieces. Mine are long enough that I won't need to piece my pieces. What you want to make sure you do before you attach all of these strips together is that this edge here, the cut edge here, is on the straight of grain or cross grain. Because if it's not, then you'll have problems. So let's say, see this one, it's all like strangely shaped because it was going around a piece. I'm going to cut it on one of my stripes. See, this is again why stripes make it easy, so that it is attached right there, and then I just do this, and now it's on the straight of grain or cross grain. Okay, now when you're piecing these together, you want to make sure that you don't piece it so that they match like this, because if they match like this, when you stitch it and you open it, it's going to be a V shape, and that's not helpful for going around straight or curves, right? So what you need to do is make sure that you have it so that the two edges, that one doesn't match, are like this. So you've got an L shape before you stitch it, and then when you open it, see, open it after you've stitched it, and it will be straight. Okay? Now when you stitch it, you want to overlap these pieces just a little bit, so that, let's say you're using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, this should match so that 1/8 is here and 1/8 is here, and you just stitch here, and then when you open it, that's going to be straight right there and not be offset. Okay, so go and sew all of your strips together and then press them so that the seams are open or facing one way or the other, and then I'll show you what to do next. Alright, for making your bias strips that are ready to be sewn, you're going to need a tool like this. You don't have to have a tool like this, but it makes it a heck of a lot easier. I think these are Clover. You can get them at a craft store or a sewing store. If not, you can get them online. It's got this plastic bit here. And I was using these wrong for years. I'll show you the right way to use them. So I am going to feed this through. You can see there's a slit right there between the plastic and the metal. Put your little point of one end through there with the right side facing up. And if you can't get it to feed through, sometimes it gets kind of stuck. You can see my point starting to come through here. There's a slit right here, and you can stick a pin in the slit and helps feed it through. You can grab it. Now look at the way it looks when it starts coming through there. It folds under both sides. So the reason you cut it 1 inch and you want 1/2 inch finished is because this turns each edge under a 1/4 inch. Now I was using it like this for a long time. That's not how you actually want to use it. You want to use it so you're doing it from the right side, not the wrong side. So grab your iron and hold it here. Make sure that this is positioned well. And you use this to hold. Okay. And just push it along the iron, and you can help feed your fabric through. Try to keep it evenly spaced at the end here so you don't get more seam allowance on one side or another. And that's what it looks like on the back side. Isn't that cool? All right, so just do your whole length of strips, and then I'll show you what to do next. Forgot to mention, when you come to your join, it's going to be a little bit trickier, so go slow. You might need to redo that bit. Sometimes it goes through no problem, sometimes it gets kind of stuck, and you can go on the back side again and push with your pin to help it go through just a little bit at a time, and then iron it, and then put it through, and then iron it. Okay? So yep, just keep on going. Now that you have your bias made, you are going to take your cuff, and as you can see, I've got 1/2 inch seam allowance because that's what the pattern called for. You want to match this seam amount, which is 1/4 inch on your bias, to this. So what you're going to do is trim this down to 1/4 inch. Do that on both sleeves. Okay, I've trimmed my seam allowance down. I've eyeballed it. It doesn't have to be exact, but get it to where it's close to 1/4 inch as you can. Now, you see this line? This is the underarm seam where you join your cuff. This is the end of the bias. You want to extend the end of the bias so it's at least 1/4 inch past that seam, and the reason why is when you're done, you're going to sew the two ends of this together and give it a nice finish on the inside. I used to overlap it, but I find this way a lot easier. So open up the one side that you press down, and you can see this line here from where you pressed it. Match that pressed line to your stitch line here. So at least 1/4 inch over, pin through the fold line and match the stitch line. Oh, it's thick right there. Okay. Now, pin that all the way around so that it matches your stitch line. And when you're stitching your cuff to your bodice, you don't really need to use tiny stitches like I did. I completely forgot. You can use a big basting stitch. You basically want to hold it in place until you're able to do your facing. Alright, so pin that all the way around. When you get to the end, pin the same way with a little bit of an overlap, at least 1/4 inch. And I'll show you that when I've pinned it. Okay, I've pinned all the way around, and I'm at the end, and you can see this is the long tail of your bias. Now, grab another pin, and you can open this and see that's where the join is of the cuff and the underarm seam of the bodice. Now, pin right up there next to this one. Match that fold line with your stitch line, and hopefully your fabric's not as thick as mine. Alright, so down. Now this tail, you can just clip that off. Okay. Leave yourself at least 1/2 inch. You need seam allowance here or else it'll fray. Alright, now when you sew this, I want you to start where this pin is, so all the way around. Stop where this pin is. This should not be stitched down. Okay? Start at this pin, all the way around, end at this pin. Okay, do that. Alright, I sewed all the way around and stopped at those two pins. Now what it looks like when you fold it down is this. Isn't that pretty? It's fun with stripes because you can really tell. Now you're going to sew these two ends together. So you're going to make it so your pin will go right here abutted to the edge of your cuff. See? So here's your cuff. Push these up and put your pin right where you want your stitching to go, really close to the edge of the cuff. But don't grab it. Make sure that it's free. Now get your scissors and cut yourself the two ends so that they match. What makes this look even better is if you have your seam allowance going up. Oh, I didn't leave enough. Leave more than me. and then you can stitch it from the raw edge to the raw edge and then fold these back down so that this is nice and finished. Alright, so give that a stitch and then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, after this is done finished being stitched, it looks like this, and when you fold it down, it looks like that. Ta-da! See, mine's a little bit off center. It doesn't really matter. No one's going to see it. Yeah, you can get as nitpicky as you want and make it as perfect as you want. Alright, now you can see that the seam allowance here is 1/4 inch, and the bias extends beyond that. Ooh. Make sure you clip all your threads. I ran out of bobbin as soon as I started, as is usual, right? Always get to the tricky part and then you run out of bobbin. So you can see this. Now what you're going to do is you're going to press it so that the bias goes up towards the sleeve. Okay? Go and press that up towards the sleeve. Okay, now that that is pressed up towards the sleeve, snip all your little threads. You're going to see this. This is the folded edge of the bias, the other folded edge. See, it's turned under here. You're going to pin so that it's nice and flush. All the way around. And then you are going to stitch close to this folded edge. Now you can do this by machine, or you can do it by hand. Back then it probably would have been done by hand. I probably will do it by machine because when your cuff is flipped up, no one's going to see your stitching underneath here, okay? So start at your seam, go all the way around close to the edge and into the seam. Okay, I'm finished. So if you look on the inside, it's nice and finished. I started and stopped there at the underarm seam. Inside is like this. This is my machine stitching. Of course, if you do it by hand, it won't be as visible. And when you wear it, the underarm won't show any of your serging or any of the way that you finished your seam. That's it. You can use this for cuffs. You can use this for collars. You can use this to face pockets. You can do all sorts of cool stuff with bias. So I hope that has helped you visualize what to do with bias and how to finish your cuffs. Alrighty. You can get the pattern on wearinghistory.clothing or wearinghistory.etsy.com.